Jay Malave, it's great to sit and speak with you today.
Well, thank you, Morgan. It's great to be here. Maybe it's just a few comments. I see people in uniform here and also retired service members. Just want to thank you for your service and also let you know that Lockheed Martin is proud to have served you and to continue to serve you in the future. Also, as the prior speaker mentioned, it's great to be here back in Connecticut. I grew up across the river in Newington and went to UConn as an undergrad. And so it's always great to return home. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. And I'm happy to have the opportunity to speak with you. I mean, on this topic of tipping points and tripwires, I guess let's just start right there. If you had to identify a tipping point from your vantage point, what would it be?
For us, the prior speaker talked about it, is really the adoption and acceleration and incorporation of commercial technologies into the defense industry. And it's really for the purpose of accelerating capability and delivery of that capability to our customers. And it's not like we don't modernize platforms today. As many of you know, we are the lead integrator, the platform provider for the F-35. We were the platform provider for the F-22, Sikorsky aircraft, the CH-53K King Stallion for the Marines. And so all those platforms, they get modernized frequently. But in today's world, the cycle time for modernizing these capabilities is anywhere between 1 to 2 years. And what we're trying to do is really accelerate the adoption of the commercial technologies to make those modernizations every 6 months, if possible, very similar to what the commercial industry does today. And if you think about it, things like 5G technology and networking, things like artificial intelligence, autonomy, there's a lot of discussion around autonomous vehicles, whether it be surface vehicles, undersea vehicles, or aerial vehicles, and providing that capability in a way that, again, as the prior speaker talked about, to provide that deterrent effect. And so what we're doing is we're really advancing. We have our own capability for our artificial intelligence. We actually have it here in the state of Connecticut. We are partnered with commercial industry, for example, Verizon. We've partnered with them on 5G, and we've demonstrated 5G capability. So you're talking about why does that matter? Well, it's really bringing data, sensor data that's collected off to various platforms and doing it faster and doing it in a more secure way. And so we're trying to bring all of those capabilities to our customers, and so that they can ultimately get better situational awareness, understanding, and a viewpoint of the operating environment. And so again, I'll give you another example. As I mentioned, we are the platform provider for the F-22, the F-35. Both of those platforms were designed with dedicated, specific communication systems. They were never intended to actually communicate together. And so their communication systems and their data transfer systems were to go down to the ground, process, and to determine what to do with it. What we're doing today is really figuring out how to connect those, and so that the data can transfer between the platforms. It can be processed more quickly, and again, provide the sensor capability that comes off those aircraft and be able to take action sooner than the services have been able to do in the past. And again, when you simply talk about it, and a lot of this is, I think a lot of the audience probably is aware of Joint All-Domain Command and Control, when you simply say it, is how do you take all the information, so you sense it from the sensors, you make sense of it, you process it, and you need to determine, based on that information, how to act to the extent that you need to act. And that's what the capability we're trying to really accelerate for our customer.
There's a lot that you just said there. I'm glad we have some time to unpack it all, but I'm going to start from the last piece you just put together. I mean, time is of the essence, so the idea of being able to have aircraft speak with each other and share that data more quickly. How quickly can you bring that capability online? And I would imagine that part of the reason we haven't seen that up until now is because how do you keep it secure?
Right. Well, that's a great question, and that's what we've been working again with these commercial partners. Is how do you take that commercial technology and ruggedize it, if you will, making sure it's secure for defense applications. In the industry, we refer to it as resiliency. So low probability of detect, low probability of intercept in these communication systems. To be honest, we've been testing that stuff for a number of years now, and it is becoming closer and closer to field ready. And again, Lockheed Martin, we're the largest defense player in the industry. We were selected as the lead integrator for Defense of Guam, which is an integrated air and defense air and integrated defense system. And that is taking together all of different command and control systems, bringing them together, and bringing able to also the asset connectivity. and doing it in such a way that provides, again, the situational awareness and the ability to defend that area in a way that they've never been defended before. We also were the lead integrator on the Northern Edge, which is Admiral Aquilino in Indo-PACOM. Again, these are test systems that we go through, and they go through exercises, and again, taking the similar technologies and applying them there in an exercise to prove them out. And then finally, when you think about internationally, we've also were selected as the lead integrator for a program called Air 6500, which is the same thing across all domains in the country of Australia. And so we're connecting the Navy, the Air Force, and their land forces all together to be able to provide them, again, these systems that provide that situational awareness in a way that's never been proven before.
I want to take a step back and just ask maybe a really basic question, and that is the fact that this integration of commercial technologies to be able to bring all of these capabilities forward faster. Mm-hmm. The fact that this is a tipping point now, I mean, how does it speak to, because you're in the business of deterrence, literally, how does it speak to a changing business model? How does it speak to the economics? Why is this a tipping point now? Why was this not possible before?
It's a great question. The whole concept of joint all-domain command and control, it's really it's accelerated it over, let's say, the past 5 years, the concept. And when you think about it, take a step back, it's pretty intuitive. Why wouldn't you want to have everything networked? Why wouldn't you have the best type of situational awareness that you possibly can? But the technology wasn't there. And so over the last really 5, even over 10 years, the technology has caught up to the concept and making it more viable. And so as that has been accelerating, we've seen and we continue to see that it's more deployable in a military application. And that's what we've been very focused on. As far as, I'm the CFO, so financial impact, I love to see the numbers. For us, it's really where we see, it's almost a ticket to play. We see over the next 5 to 10 years. And the platforms that we develop and the platforms that are in service today are going to need to incorporate this capability. And so I wouldn't say it's a vector for growth per se for the industry, but it's something that we need to be able to deliver because it is the demand.
And I would imagine it means, especially if you're starting to adopt more commercial capabilities, strike more of these partnerships, whether it's Verizon, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's some of the other companies that you've forged these partnerships with, it also, I'd imagine, means being able to do more with less.
That's exactly right. You think about it, you have a much more ubiquitous types of systems, provided obviously that they're secure and resilient, but you bring more commonality and interoperability in the communication systems as well as in the command and control processing systems. And so that will make it easier for all the various contractors that support the defense industry. It's not a Lockheed Martin standard or another company's standard. It would be what we're seeking is a common standard so they can plug in and really drive the capability forward. And the interesting thing too, when you talk about artificial intelligence, we've also taken that to applications outside of defense. We're working with the U.S. government today on firefighting. And what we're trying to do is deploy our assets, provide our artificial intelligence capability to be able to predict wildfires before they occur, and where they do occur, be able to predict where they may go, so that the assets can be the best deployed to suppress those fires.
Yeah, no, it's an issue that we've all experienced. I mean, even just this past summer with the smoke and the haze that's come over this area of the country from Canada. Obviously, everything we've seen in Hawaii as well. I guess walk me through a little bit more of that technology, because you do have this partnership with NVIDIA, for example, around digital twins.
So yeah, NVIDIA, and really the best application for them has been in the firefighting realm. We partner with them on artificial intelligence. As I mentioned, we already have our own internal, I'll call it foundational capability, and we've had it since 2021. And interestingly, I know there's a lot of questions related to the ethics surrounding artificial intelligence. We actually established our own policies and governance processes for the ethical use of artificial intelligence back in 2020. It's really at the moment, having human intervention to make final decisions, particularly when you're dealing with something where you may deliver an effect. It's not really going to be machine decision. There'll be recommendations made by the AI, but ultimately the final decision would be made by a human. And so there's various steps that you would go through to determine and ensure that the AI doesn't do something that wasn't intended. just going back to the artificial intelligence with, really the firefighting is the best example. And you think about it, we've got satellite assets that are able to detect infrared heat. And as those detections are made, the question then becomes, okay, well, what do you learn from that and what can you do? And as fires start to erupt and as they start to spread, we've really partnered with NVIDIA, really trying to provide that predictive capability to the firefighting community. So again, they can just utilize the assets in the best manner to reduce destruction.
Yeah. I mean, on CNBC, I don't think there's a day that goes by that we don't have a conversation about AI. NVIDIA is sort of the partner of choice for everybody right now as the infrastructure is built out, especially around things like generative AI. How do you think about it? I guess more broadly, we use this example of firefighting, but more broadly at Lockheed Martin, when we talk about this from a geopolitical standpoint, this idea of an AI arms race, what does that mean in terms of how you're employing at the company, both internally, externally? I mean, there's a big conversation afoot, for example, about, and you kind of touched on it with the ethics, around what this looks like in the kill chain.
Yeah, so if you think about it, again, when you have all these various assets in theater, and now you've figured out a way how to connect them, the data that comes off those assets and those sensors is immense. And so you need a way to be able to process it, to interpret the data and determine what the patterns are. What is it actually telling us? And so when I talked about before making sense, that's what the AI will help us do. Really sift through the information, determine what it's actually saying, and then recommend a course of action through the processing. And you think about it again, comparing that to the way this would have been handled in the past is all these assets come down to a ground station. Humans are in there in the ground station trying to make sense of what all that information is. So you're taking different bits of information, you're trying to bring them together and make sense of what that really means and what you should do about it. The AI will help you do that much quicker than you've ever been able to do that in the past.
Yeah, there's been, I mean, Lockheed Martin's kind of on the forefront in terms of hypersonic technology development as well. And just sort of this idea that I've heard from some folks in the industry more broadly that the role that something like AI is going to play, for example, in missile defense, homeland security, a world where hypersonics are a part of the deterrence puzzle.
Mm-hmm. That's absolutely right, because again, the fact that you would have a system or a capability that enables you to detect and process quicker than your adversary is a deterrence effect in and of itself. And so those are things that we've been clearly working on trying to advance and perfect. And we view that as absolutely being a deterrence.
You mentioned autonomy as well, so I want to go back to that. It's certainly, whether it's Replicator initiative that's been unveiled by the DoD in the last couple of weeks, whether it's the Loyal Wingman that's part of the NGAD push for the Air Force, I guess. Walk me through what that looks like, how that develops, and Lockheed's role to play in it.
Yeah, so we've also are developing our just the autonomous capability. We're here in Connecticut. Sikorsky has been developing that technology for the past 10 years. We call it Matrix Technologies, and what they have is an unmanned Black Hawk that could provide logistics types of missions for the Army. And so that's something that we've been testing. In fact, I was at Sikorsky maybe 2 months ago, and I took a spin in one of the pilotless Black Hawks. Of course, it was
how was that?
Scared, but it worked great. We went around the Sikorsky campus, came back, and again, the software basically programmed through an iPad and told the aircraft what to do. It's also designed to detect potential obstructions. It can change course based on what it sees in the environment, what it senses, and it has just a tremendous amount of capability. And so, again, we see applications for that in the near future, and that's one example. You talked about kind of next-gen technology, Loyal Wingman, things like that. There's a lot of activity happening there, and again, it's really developing that software capability, the autonomous capability. There's a number of programs that I really can't talk about because they're classified, but we're in the thick of working in that area as well.
Okay. It also raises the question, just going back to this idea of, partnering on commercial technologies, which is all really part of this 21st century warfighter, 21st century security vision that's been laid out by your CEO, Jim Takelett, over the last couple of years as well. How do you decide what to develop internally versus where to partner versus an acquisition?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we leave that aperture wide open to decide, and it's really fact-based and case by case. But we're not going to probably get into 5G technology development, and so we see that the technologies are already developed. It's how do you now apply that in a defense application, and so. I think when Jim first started, there were a lot of questions on whether or not you're going to start buying tech companies, and that really wasn't the strategy. It was really intended to partner with them, bring those capabilities that they've already developed, and just apply them here. And what we provide them, when you think about it from a quid pro quo perspective, they've got that technology. We've got the expertise, the mission expertise and experience, and we also know how to contract with the government. It's fairly complicated. And so we give them a market channel while at the same time being able to bring in a technology that the defense industry hasn't really been able to deploy as of yet. And so when you're looking at a situation like that, it really doesn't make sense to go try to grow it organically. And we don't really see the need to go buy it because we've got very capable companies that are willing to partner with us on that. And we find mutually beneficial relationships, and we're fine to run with that. To the extent that there's certain things that really are defense specific, and that would make sense from an M&A perspective, by all means, we would look at that and go for it. Sure.
Take Lit in front of lawmakers this week said that you guys were in, quote, late-stage negotiations for solid rocket motor maker. Is that an acquisition? Is that an investment?
Well, what I would say here, I don't really have anything imminent to say other than what Jim has already said. I think we're pleased with the progress that we're making there, and just trying to take a step back of what are we trying to accomplish. There are good industry partners today that provide solid rocket motors. We're of the belief, however, that capacity and capability needs to be increased, and that's what we're pursuing. Again, it could be through the formation of a partnership. It could be a full-out acquisition. We believe that the capability needs to be expanded, and we're willing to pursue whatever means is necessary for that. We early stage technology and set a budget of $200 million of investment in those. We've doubled that since the first 6 months that Jim came to the company. We doubled it to $400 million of investment in these companies. But we also have an entity that we refer to as LM Evolve. And that is intended to also develop partnerships with the commercial industry, either commercial business models or commercial technologies that we can co-invest and do in such a way that it doesn't get suppressed or buried in the big Lockheed Martin $66 billion behemoth. It gives it an opportunity to really have its own vehicle to pursue commercial type of whether it's business models again or technologies. And it's really intended to really make it easy to partner with these companies.
And if I recall correctly, you've got a lot of space incubation happening there, right?
Yes, we do. We actually put in there lunar satellite communication. We have a development program there, and it's something that's in our wheelhouse for military satellite communications. Is something that we do today, but this is now for lunar applications, and this gives us an opportunity to really make a different model, almost like a commercial Verizon pay by as a service versus we will give you and sell you a platform and let the government go on from there.
So we've just talked about a lot of the cutting edge technologies that you're focused on and you're developing, but when you talk about early stage investments, what are some of the things that are compelling right now? Things like AI. There was a previous speaker talking about advanced manufacturing, additive manufacturing, 3D manufacturing is one area. To give you an example of one company that we've invested early in Terran Orbital. And Terran Orbital now provides the satellite vehicles for a few of our programs. Our SDA transport layer, which is a military satellite communication for Earth, low Earth orbit. They provide the satellite buses for that, low cost, small satellite. And if you think about Lockheed Martin's history and its legacy, it's been the exquisite provider of satellites. And as the industry has shifted to these proliferated satellite constellations, we've had to adapt. And so we formed that partnership and actually now have an ownership interest in Terran Orbital. And so those are the types of companies that we see that can have either an acceleration of the technology we have today, or maybe have some type of technology gap. And in that case,
we did not have the small satellite vehicle product line. We had the midsize as well as the large exquisite satellite vehicle, but not the small sat, and they filled in a gap, and we're using them today.
I do want to shift a little bit here and talk a little bit about One LMX, which is this internal initiative to become more automated, more digitized, to move more quickly with aspects of production. Sikorsky, not so far from here, as you mentioned, is an example of where you're implementing this.
Yes, and we're really implementing it across the company. This is a multi-year, multi-billion-dollar investment, and it's intended to really re-engineer all of our internal processes to make sure that we're adapted and we're ready for 21st century security. And that's what we refer to, what we've just been speaking to, our 21st century security capabilities. And so all of our internal processes, from design all the way to sustainment of our product and all the back office support, is going through process re-engineering. And our underlying systems, whether they're ERPs, human resource capital management systems, our customer relationship management systems, our manufacturing execution systems, our model-based engineering systems, are all being revamped and renewed to be able to enable this re-engineering of process. We're excited. When we ended last year, we had over 100 of contracts that were using our model-based engineering and our digital twin capability already to provide a quicker capability to our customer. If you think about it, when you think about the things that we design, they take anywhere between 4 to 5 years to design and bring ready, and that's just for a low-rate initial production lot. What we're trying to do is really accelerate that, really compress the design cycle and the testing cycle of that capability so we can deliver that to our customer earlier than we've ever done in the past. And so in order to be able to do that, we're redesigning everything in the company.
So if you go from 4 to 5 years, what does it go down to? What's the goal?
It really depends on the system, but you're talking taking a year, potentially 18 months out of that process, on average.
And it's across the company, across your facilities.
Right, and that would be the initial design. As I mentioned before in your first question, we're also trying to configure the company so we can provide capability upgrades and modernizations much quicker than we've done in the past, and the goal would be a modernization cycle that's every 6 months versus multiple years there.
So I guess this sort of expands out then. You and I have had these conversations, I don't even know how many quarters now, about things like supply chain, labor, what it's taking to get production lines moving and ramp them up as well, and investments there too, especially as we talk about things like replenishment in the wake of Ukraine and increased orders there. I guess how does all of this fit back into that scenario too? Like the parts you can control and the parts you can't.
You're referring to our 21st century security?
Yeah, and just this idea of modernization, of production lines and development and design and sort of everything.
What we've done, and again, as I mentioned, when you think about Lockheed Martin, we have the contracts and programs in the thousands. And so when I mentioned we've got 100, we're in the early innings of really fully adopting that across the company and all of our programs. The One LMX initiatives that we have, it's treated like its own separate program. We've got our own program management office for that. We've got an army of people that are working on delivering that capability, both the software capability, the systems capability, and also driving the re-engineering of the processes. At the same time, we are deploying those processes and those systems to the extent they are available to really, again, accelerate the capabilities that we can deliver to our customer. When you take a look at where we are in the current situation, its applicability is somewhat limited. We're dealing with legacy systems. When you're talking about a GMLRS, you're talking about a HIMARS, those types of capabilities. When you think about that in the Ukraine theater, those are legacy production systems. Those are legacy products that we have to essentially kind of power through. And what we're trying to do in many of those cases is double production. HIMARS, we're trying to go from 48 a year to 96 a year over the next 3 years. On GMLRS, we're at a capacity of 10,000 units per year, trying to take that up to 14,000 per year over the next 3 years. PAC-3, which is part of the Patriot missile system, we're trying to go from 450 today to 550 by 2025 to 650 a year in 2027. To the extent that we can use our process re-engineering to enable that, we are absolutely doing that, but it's somewhat limited. And you talked about, when we do talk about pretty much every quarter supply chain, it is still an issue. It varies. It's really case by case on the product and system by system. In certain cases, you have technology development and modernizations, which are taking a little bit slower to incorporate. In other cases, it's just being able to ramp up. I'd say, and we've talked about this, I think the labor availability has gotten better over the past years, a lot better, both internally at Lockheed Martin as well as in our supply chain. But the delivery of which, and converting that to faster delivery is not yet there. And if you think about it, there was a wave of retirements. When you talk about bringing together these systems, the people that did these, there's a lot of knowledge that went out the door over the last few years. And the proficiencies levels, even though we have people, we've been able to replace people, they don't have the proficiency levels of the people that they replaced. And so it's going to take a little bit of time to develop that proficiency and get us up to these ramp rates we're trying to get to. And that's why, everyone asks, well, why can't you just flip a switch and go from 48 to 96 on HIMARS? It's a multi-year process, unfortunately.
You just mentioned that some of the talent that's gone out the door. Is that just people retiring out of the workforce? Is that people going to other industries?
It was mostly retirements that we've seen. Yeah, and it was difficult. It's not like we didn't see some of it, but the ability to hire in advance of that just wasn't there at the point in time. And so that has eased, certainly, over the past year, but there was a gap period now that we have to work through.
Yeah, and I guess to get back to the supply chain piece of the puzzle, it's a conversation that I know I have with folks regularly, and it's sort of, the defense industrial base. How do you strengthen it? How do you shore it up? How do you diversify it? How do we, enable the types of shortages and issues that have happened over the last couple of years to not happen again in the future? Mm-hmm. Your thoughts on it?
And this is a topic that I think Jim spoke about in his congressional testimony. We're of the view that increasing the amount of participants in the defense industrial base is a good thing. It does increase the competition. It should accelerate innovation. And it also provides what Jim refers to as anti-fragility into this whole supply base. And so the more that we can have dual source, triple source on particular types of capabilities and systems, that's all a good thing, to being able to ramp up, and like we've seen ourselves having to ramp up over the past year and a half. And so, the way we view that is there's certain areas, and particularly where we've talked about on the adoption of commercial technologies, we're of the view that the acquisition process should be modernized for those types of capabilities. When you're talking about the large platforms, F-35, NGAD, whatever, those types of things, that probably can work okay with the current acquisition infrastructure that exists today. But we need an acquisition process that really can move at the same speed of commercial development technology and what we're trying to match in defense as well. And so we've gotten some receptiveness there, and we'll continue to try to advocate and lead for that.
What do you think needs to happen? What still needs to happen in terms of that acquisition process? Putting you on the hot seat here.
Yeah, it's you go through today. You think about it, the way the acquisition process goes, and particularly in these large, exquisite systems. There's draft RFPs that are developed. Those go down to industry. Industry looks at them, gives comments, and it is complex. There's no question about it. When you're talking about these systems, technology that's going into it and developing the requirements is very, very involved. But that process takes time just to develop the requirements. And then going through the process of issuing an RFP, and then the process of evaluating the RFP. We just submitted a proposal on a particular, for a particular program or pursuit, and you're talking thousands and thousands of pages of information that we're providing. A lot of it is technical. You have to get through that. But you think about the armies of people have to process through that and figure out what the best technical solution is for that RFP. It takes a ton of time. And then you go through the various steps of the acquisition process. Then potentially, depending on the players in it, you can go through a protest process. And that just continues to extend the process out over and over again. And so the time it takes between the concept to actually just starting the development process is just evolved and very lengthy. And it's just too long when you think about it in terms of the environment and the world affairs that we see today.
Mm-hmm. And of course, this, as we are seeing China and others on the world stage move quickly and employ economic models, business models, tech models that operate differently than ours.
Yeah, you think about it, China particularly, they fuse their commercial and military technologies together, those companies, and so they already have a system that makes the ease of transfer from commercial to military more seamless than what we have. And that's why we've talked about really adopting in our 21st century security initiatives is trying to match, if not exceed, that speed of technology incorporation. A lot of them are government sponsored, and so their availability and access to funding is probably faster than what you see a startup in the U.S. And so, the U.S., the government has tried to, they've got these incubator types of groups and agencies to try to replicate that, or at least accelerate small company development, but we still are not at a speed that we should be.
And then, of course, maybe throw in, I have to go here, maybe throw in the possibility of a government shutdown or best case scenario, continuing resolution, with analysts now gaming out the possibility of even an extended continuing resolution. What does that do to all of this?
In both cases, it's disruptive. It's not really helpful. And it becomes a question of degrees of disruption. When you talk about, I'll take in the worst case scenario, in the case of a shutdown, you can't, in both cases, the government can't have new start programs, so they can't issue new contracts. And so for a government contractor who was ready, was notified that they were awarded, and they're ready to gear up for this particular program and staff up, now that period of time to start work gets delayed. So what do you do with the workforce that you just staffed up to? So that causes disruption. It also causes a delay to the scheduled delivery of that capability. And so, no one, we're kind of accustomed to CRs every year, periodic times with shutdowns, but no one really appreciates what that means to the back end of the delivery of capability. Even for 2 months, 3 months, whatever the case may be, it extends things out, and it's just disruptive. In a CR, besides the fact that you can't do new starts, you're limited to the funding that you had in the prior year. So if you had a particular contract or a program that was expected to accelerate in its funding so that you can meet some type of ramp, that is going to be limited. So again, it pushes out the ability to deliver that capability. And the further these things extend, the more problematic it becomes because the whole system bogs down and the funding trickles out. And so you lose the benefit of speed. And we're in a time period where speed is of the essence, and we really can't lose that.
So have you been preparing for all of those possibilities I just laid out then?
We do. I mean, there's certain things, like we're a large company, so there is, a limited amount of stopgap funding that we can self-fund, but again, it's limited. You're not talking months or years, you're talking weeks. And so if you get in any type of extended situation, particularly in a shutdown scenario, there's only so much that we can self-fund on behalf of the customer before we have to start slowing things down. And if you start slowing, that ripples through the industry. And so you think about cash disbursements, we have to start thinking about now, we start slowing down cash disbursements. What does that mean to the supply chain all the way through, particularly for those that are trying to live through and making sure that they can meet payroll. And so, we've, for the past 2 years since COVID hit, we've been accelerated payments to our suppliers, particularly small suppliers. And so we have been paying them well in advance of terms to make sure that they're on solid financial footing. But when you have a situation like that, that limits the capacity to be able to do those types of things. And if anything, it may swing the pendulum to the other side, where we may have to limit the amount that we actually pay because we're running up against cash constraints. So there's certainly consequences to doing that. It's not inconsequential, and the fact that we've been dealing with this for every year doesn't make it really any more acceptable, to be honest.
And it gets back to the whole notion of how, a resilient supply chain as well. A key part of the supply chain, of course, is semiconductors. I know you've partnered with global foundries. I think you're involved, whether it's directly or indirectly, with CHIPS Act as well. Global foundries, I think, just got awarded some money this week tied to that. I guess, walk me through how that part of the supply chain becomes more resilient, how quickly you can bring some of that capability online and have onshore chip making at Lockheed's behest?
Yeah, we've also partnered with Intel on semiconductor manufacturing, and it's really making sure that they understand defense requirements, that we can have a dedicated level of supply for military applications. And again, that runs through the supply chain. Being the final product integrator, we do have direct purchases of microelectronics that go into our subsystems that we design and manufacture, but it rolls all the way through the supply chain. And our intent is to make sure the entire supply chain has full, it's all of its needs are met by what we're seeing here in the CHIPS Act. And so we've been front and center with both of those companies to make sure, A, that they understand what the defense requirements are, that they have dedicated spaces for that, and that we also accelerate the technology development so we can incorporate those. You talk today's iPhone 15, right? You're 3 nanometer type of technology. Defense applications are a little bit behind that, but how do you accelerate those type of technologies and bring them in as well?
So I guess how much of your chips are being manufactured overseas versus what you can bring onshore now? How quickly does this capability stand up?
You're still talking multiple years before that comes in. Obviously, our products cannot be sourced in any way from China. And so we go through that, but there's a reliance on Taiwan and Asia today.
I guess just going back to China and the fact that we have seen some tech-related sanctions, bans, regulations put in place, whether it is with chips, whether it is with quantum or technologies related to AI. Does it go far enough when we're thinking about all of these capabilities from a military and defense standpoint?
It's a great question. I don't know if you saw, I think it was Huawei developed a phone with some technologies capabilities that the U.S. was surprised that they were able to do. It had 5G technologies in it. The question is how effective is that technology? But look, at the end of the day, you have to assume that they will be innovative, figure out ways to work around. So I think the short answer to your question is I think there needs to be continued vigilance to be able to contain that because they'll find ways around it. Okay.
I do want to, before we start opening this up to questions, I do just want to ask you about, you mentioned it before, but the F-35 program. Mm-hmm. You trimmed delivery estimates earlier this month. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we've had this GAO report as well this week about the fact that I think only 55% of the fleet is mission capable right now. A lot of blame to go around in that report, but certainly pointing to the reliance on Lockheed Martin and contractors in that process as well. How are you thinking about F-35 moving forward and continuing to hone this program for the government?
Yeah, first things first. So you think about it right now, we talked about the delayed incorporation of Technology Refresh 3. And just for the audiences, just for their knowledge, the Tech Refresh 3 program it's really an upgrade to the mission computer, the aircraft memory system, as well as the panoramic cockpit display. And so these are building blocks, the enablers to further modernize that platform over the next really 7 years through the end of the decade. We'll see upgrades to electronic warfare, the weapon system suite, the communication system. So all of the mission systems are being upgraded, but this is the foundation to be able to enable those other modernization capabilities. I think it's no secret, it's well documented that Tech Refresh 3 has been delayed, just the design and development of that. What we try to do is accelerate the testing cycle of the integration software so that we can make up some of the time that was lost. What we found, and we started flight testing in January, and we had a goal of delivering our first TR-3 equipped aircraft in December. And what we've learned over that period of time, that just the learnings through testing the software, and just to give you kind of the frame of reference, every time we have a software release, a new software release, we have to go into the lab and test. You're talking tens of thousands of test points for that particular mission capability. And that inevitably is going to cause some findings and bugs. We have to go and determine what the root cause of those is. It may be its supplier, it may be with our software, identify it, correct it, and then reincorporate it and send it back into the test cycle. Once we're done with that test cycle, then we can start flight testing. So the learnings that we've had just cause us to believe that the earliest the best that we would be able to do at this point in time would be delivering the Tech Refresh 3 capability on the F-35 between April and June of next year. And that basically takes our performance to date, what we've learned, and really incorporated that in the forward look. And so we feel a lot more confident we'll be able to hit that deadline. But still, there's learnings to be had. What we have really over the next few weeks, over the next month, we have the next release, which will have the full operational tactical capability of the aircraft. And so that's a big one. We'll go through flight testing through that, and then we have another software release maybe end of next year, or end of this year, maybe into January. We'll go through, do software cleanup, and get ourselves ready for April to June delivery. So we feel confident, but it's a fairly complex upgrade that we've had. It's a really step change in capability and really keeping that aircraft relevant and ahead of the adversaries. As far as sustainment, a little known fact, 90% of the components and the parts on the aircraft are performing better than what their original design lives were from a mean time between failure standpoint. When you get into the logistics element of the sustainment, there's so many aspects of sustainment that all have to be working together and synchronized. And so it's easy to go in there, blame this, blame that, the other, but it's almost like a manufacturing type process where you have to have synchronization between your suppliers and your own manufacturing and assembly capability. It's very similar in sustainment. So, we continue to offer really new packages, new ways of providing the best-in-class sustainment that we can on the aircraft to our customer. We have to work jointly with them to develop that capability. And we will, at the end of the day, we'll work follow their lead. Really, the Joint Program Office ultimately will determine how the aircraft should be best sustained, and we'll follow that lead and provide them the best service that we can.
One more thing here on this, because to me, F-35, it's in the name, joint, right? The fact that this is kind of the penultimate partnership between allies and various countries in terms of the manufacturing capabilities. How does that speak to the role that, say, co-production in Europe or defense deals with allies play to this entire ecosystem of production and bringing costs down?
Well, that's a great question. And you think about it, you have to go back to the derivation of the F-35 concept to begin with, and it was in conjunction with partner countries. We have a final assembly shop in Italy. Italy was a partner country. We also have just other partner countries that provide in-country capability. That was kind of part of the deal way back when. We also have the large primes are partnered with us on the program. Northrop Grumman does the center fuselage on the aircraft. BAE provides electronic warfare suite, and it goes on and on and on from there. That program is absolutely a global international program. You're right from an integration standpoint. But again, a lot of either the manufacturing techniques, also areas that you may have seen. We announced an agreement with Rheinmetall in Germany to provide added capacity on center fuselages, and they're going to ramp up to make sure that we have security of supply in that area. We've had some issues there in the past, and so it's one that we have to integrate. We're responsible for ultimate production and delivery of the aircraft to the supplier. There absolutely is a focus on continuous cost reduction on the aircraft, and a lot of that we're responsible for. So a lot of that, whether they're manufacturing changes, we will provide that to our partner countries to the extent that it impacts their systems that they're providing on the aircraft. Also, design changes, value engineering types of opportunities, and there's still room to go there. I mean, having said that, you probably every CEO you talk to and CFO talks and complains about inflation. There's a reality there as well, and so the cost of material input has been significant, and the F-35 has material in it. There's been no change there. But again, our objective is really to see what we can do to drive productivity, to drive efficiency, to drive design changes that will continue to reduce the cost of the aircraft, or at least offset these impacts that we've seen in inflation. But it is an absolutely integrated supply chain, value chain all the way through the final assembly process, because we're not, as you mentioned, we don't final assemble every aircraft, but we've got a good system in place. It works pretty well. What we need to do is just get Tech Refresh 3 in so we can restart and get going on deliveries and have the system work at the 156 per year that we've committed to in 2025.
So partnerships with allies and with other countries, partnerships with commercial companies as well. Anything else I haven't asked you that sort of speaks to your tipping point and this moment that we're in from a defense standpoint?
No, I think you hit it. We hit the what we're trying to do in terms of bringing in commercial technologies in and what 21st century security means to us. We've talked about what we're trying to do internally and restructure and reorganize and reprocess internally how we can meet those demands and ultimately be able to serve the audience here in the best way they possibly can serve. We hear it. They want the capability. They want it faster. There's certain dates that they want particular capabilities, and we're trying to drive and meet those schedules as best we can.
Jay Malave, the Chief Financial Officer of Lockheed Martin, thank you so much for joining me here.
Thank you, Morgan.
I think we're going to open up to questions in case anyone has one.
Hi, good morning. I'm First Class Robert DeLillo from the U.S. Coast Guard Academy. I'm a presidential fellow with the Center of the Study of Presidency and Congress, and my research is going to be on American military resource allocation. So I'm curious if, as a critical commercial partner to the DoD and DHS, if you think the current state of U.S. defense expenditure and appropriation is where it should be. Are we allocating the American dollar towards the correct infrastructure, moving well into the mid-21st century?
Great question. Thank you for that question. As a defense industry participant, we'll always say more, more, more. You've heard the leaders, whether it's the secretaries of the various services, the chiefs of staff say the same things, where the term divest to invest. And what they're looking for is the capability, the ability to really just have a little bit more discretion to retire those platforms that don't really have the same level of relevance that they may have had 5 or 10 years ago in what they see a future fight. And using that available financial capacity to be able to fund the new development technologies that they're looking for and looking to accelerate. So that's one means by which you can essentially hold the budget flat and be able to provide a new capability to the customer. They go through their budgeting cycle. It's a fairly extensive budgeting cycle. They go in and it goes to the DoD, and the DoD then sends that up and to the administration. The administration then puts forward their what is called to the FYDP, the future year defense request, and it's a multi-year request, 5 years, which provides at least insight into what their spending priorities are. I think it really is dependent on the entire value chain. I think the concept of divest to invest really is an absolutely good concept. It's one that needs to be followed. There's one also in terms of relentless efficiency that we just talked about that the defense industry needs to deliver. More with less is something that we do embrace, but it's something that we actually have to show at the same time. And then ultimately, I think for the appropriators, they have to acknowledge really where we are in our defense posture, determine what capabilities need to be delivered. Of course, you talk about defense, when you put it in the grand scheme and from a budgeting perspective, in terms of deficit spending, there's a reality that they have to deal with as well. And I think that by and large, they get there. It's kind of, in a democratic sense, it's a little messy sometimes. When you're talking about $800+ billion of defense budget, it's well in excess of what you see any other country. And so I think I'm a believer that we can figure it out given that cycle. Yes, we'd like to see more every year in the budget increase. Of course we would. But I think that the levels of spending are sufficient for us to be able to deliver that capability. It does have to be prioritized, and decisions have to be made where certain capabilities get delayed to a certain date, and the most critical capabilities get accelerated to where we are today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Comments? I know, but we're going to go. One more question. Okay. There millions of dollars are spent every year by the defense industry in lobbying activities for high-profit, high-cost weapon systems. What we're seeing absolutely in Ukraine is a need for low-cost, mass-produced artillery shells, drones. I haven't heard you comment on what Lockheed Martin is doing for low-cost drones and air defense systems that actually work at the level where these Ukrainian soldiers are being massacred by helicopters and artillery. You know, how do we reverse the direction from high-cost, very few systems to mass-produce artillery shells in this country so we don't have to go to other countries for that kind of assistance?
Yeah, that's another great question. So when you think about it again, you know, I'll start with a little bit with where we started the conversation, where we talk about the whole concept of connecting assets. When you think about it, you could, for very little cost, you can leverage the assets that are in service today and provide incremental capability, as I mentioned, in terms of situational awareness. And so you can increase the capability at very low cost, incremental cost I will acknowledge the exquisite cost that had already been spent. That's one area. As far as some of these lower cost capabilities, drones and things like that, you know, again, those are absolute learnings that I think industry has had, the services have had, in terms of the effectiveness of those. And, you know, the interesting thing is what works in the background sometimes in order to make those capabilities available at a low cost are the exquisite systems. And I won't make an excuse because Lockheed Martin has been a historical legacy exquisite system provider. But we that's where we have geared our R&D technology or our spending towards more towards the low-cost systems to provide a swarming is probably the best word, but more, you know, volume in terms of capability at a low cost to our customer. That's an ongoing dialogue that we're having with them. You know, that's also an opportunity, really, to be honest, an entry point for new entrants into the industry as well. And so those are areas that we've looked to partner to where we can provide, say, a networking capability to these low costs. So we don't have to be the maker of everything, and we don't expect to be the maker of everything, but we can be the enabler of a lot of different things. And that's what we're spending our money on, is trying to be that enabler on whether they're high-cost exquisite systems or lower-cost drone-type systems.
Jay, thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, Morgan.
Appreciate
It's great to be here.
I'll make a round of applause for Jay and Morgan.